Okay, hi. In this video, I'm going to go over a little bit on prepping your home and prepping your home with food in case of any sort of disaster where you may run out. This is not for people who are preppers who need a detailed instructions on how to do this or that. This is for people who have not started prepping whatsoever and just want to get started in some way but are totally overwhelmed, don't know where to start, maybe don't have a lot of money or a lot of time to put into it, but just want to do one or two things here and there to make themselves feel a little bit more safe and secure. So quickly, I want to talk about why it's important to prep your home and your food supply at all. In addition to just watching the news, I think everybody's aware that our food supply is definitely in a difficult place. And it is even when there aren't disturbing things going on in the news, and even when we don't have natural disasters, our food supply is just not very secure because we rely on a lot of food from other countries and even faraway places in our own country. We don't have a very strong local food supply. So when gas prices go up, our food goes up. And in addition to that, we don't really know much about our food because it's not local as well. We can't go stop by the farm where our avocados are grown to see how they're doing and what kind of water they're using, right? So it does have health effects as well. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next video on using your local farmer to kind of bank a food supply for you as well. So again, I'm going to talk about here first just basic food storage, really simple things you can do to get started, and then just basic home prepping, not installing a new wood stove and not this kind of stuff that is, yes, amazing. But if you just live in the suburbs or you live downtown Chicago, you do not have the setup to start that right away. Maybe you can, but if you just want to get started, here are some ideas for you. So when you're starting food prepping, I always suggest to people, because I know you probably Googled it or people say, hey, buy some rice. Rice is a great idea. And in a couple moments here, I'm going to tell you to buy some rice. But don't just buy dried foods. In a scenario where you lose electricity, you will have a hard time finding water. That'll be one of your biggest concerns. So keep in mind, side note, your water heater right now, you have a tanked water heater, most of you, holds 50 or maybe even more gallons of water, clean water right now. So keep that in mind in a situation where you run out of water, you already do have some. Yes, you can do things like fill up bathtubs and stuff like that if you know that it's coming, but in an emergency, keep in mind you do have that. But you won't want to use a lot of your water to cook with. So if all you have is beans and rice and dried foods, you're going to end up using a lot of water to cook with and put yourself in a bind. So buy canned goods that are already pre-cooked that you can literally open the can and eat, and you may not have to cook if you're in a situation where you don't want to use your water or you're already out of water. Okay, keep that in mind. Also consider buying some different supplies to preserve with. So salt was a traditional way to preserve things, but also just dehydrating, which you can just use your oven on the lowest setting. You can set things outside to dry. It takes a long time, but that works too. Or you can actually buy a dehydrator. You can get a pretty cheap one for about 30 to 40 bucks, but you can find some fancier ones if that's something you really want to get into. The Excalibur brand is one of the best dehydrators there is. And so if you are in a situation where you want to start prepping some food in your home, but you have no extra money, I really suggest just buying one extra of something that you normally eat that's going to last a long time when you go to the grocery store. If you can't even think about what to do for that, then just buy one bag of rice. Just those little $2 to $3 bags of rice. Every time you go to the grocery store, put it on your list, first thing you write down, and just remember to grab one of those. You will have something that may not be what you want to eat in emergency, but you will have something to eat if you have that on hand. So if it is totally overwhelming to you to just do any sort of prepping, start there. Buy a bag of rice or a can of beans. There's my cat. When you go to the grocery store every time, okay? He's climbing up steps right now. It's pretty impressive. Okay. Um, my next suggestion is to get a deep freezer if you can. You can find them used on Marketplace, or they're not terribly expensive at home stores. If you can't get a deep freezer, another idea is to get 5-gallon buckets. You can store grains in there. Grains will eventually go bad in there as well. So keep in mind the ideal is really to freeze things. If you can get a freezer, you'll be able to store a lot of bulk food in there. On our live, someone suggested or asked what's going to happen if my power goes out to my freezer. Ideally, you'll have a generator that you will be able to hook up and run on gas. If you can't do that, freezers will actually last quite a while. They will actually hold your food good for a while. If you're actively eating out of it during an emergency, then you should be able to eat enough to get your food out. If you have a large freezer and you're storing a lot of food in there, yes, it may go bad. But keep in mind that the more full a freezer is, the longer it's going to stay frozen. So maybe try to buy a freezer that is only going to accompany what you're going to put in it. Don't buy a huge one and only keep a little bit in it. Buy a smaller one and keep that baby full, because it will stay frozen for a really long time. Even little coolers, if you get into a situation where you don't have a freezer and your electricity goes out for more than a day, putting frozen food in coolers will keep them frozen for a number of days as well. Okay, of course, and once you kind of get through those things and you start to feel a little bit more comfortable about prepping food in general, you can learn to do things at home to prep your own food, like learning to garden, having some chickens maybe, but that's kind of down the road possibly for you. So basic home prep, and again, this is super basic. If you've done nothing, you've not really thought about what would happen if your electricity went out for a couple days, here are some suggestions that I have. The three main issues that I see in that scenario are your toilet needs, water, and heating. So regarding your toilet, I don't think a lot of people think about how if the electricity goes out, I mean, most people by at this point have had electricity go out once or twice, but for a long period of time, more than a couple days, then your bathroom's going to get pretty gross. You won't be able to use the toilet, right? And you're going to have to find some sort of alternative. Even if your electricity goes out for a day, things start to get pretty gross. So having some sort of composting toilet setup available to you is really going to help you out. And all you need to do that is a 5-gallon bucket and some sort of mulch. So it could be leaves, it could be brush, it could be wood chips, it could be grass clippings, it could be sawdust, which is what most people use. Any of those things are going to mesh with your pee and poo and essentially make compost that you're not going to want to put on plants that you're going to eat, but it would work, around just, flowers and that kind of decorative things. But regardless, it'll save you from having a very unhygienic situation if you do run out of electricity for a long period of time. In addition to just the mulch in your 5-gallon bucket, you can go to Walmart and get a camping toilet seat, which just sticks on top of a 5-gallon bucket so that it's a little bit more pleasurable for you to sit on the bucket and go do your business. That would be the other thing you can get for that. Now, the next thing is your water. Having some sort of water supply is going to be critical. Again, you have some water already in your tanked water heater, but from there you're going to need to find something local and you'll need a way to purify it. So having a Berkey or something like that will help. If you can't afford a Berkey or it's just not in the budget for a while, you can simply learn how to purify water. You can just Google it, how to purify water in a 5-gallon bucket. It typically includes some sort of rocks like gravel and sand, and that'll help you quite a bit. And it's something kind of easy and fun to learn in case you're in a situation where you do need water and you don't have a Berkey or something like that. Okay? And then the last thing is heating. If you don't have a fireplace, and if you did have a fireplace, you would just go into that room and close the doors, make sure that the smoke will be able to be vented properly, but just heat that room. If you don't have any sort of fireplace like that, my suggestion would be to buy a rocket stove. I should look up how much they are. I'm sure you can find some used too. But they will heat a room. They won't heat your whole house, but you will at least be able to survive in winter. And where I live in Northern Illinois, that's the biggest concern, right? We don't have a huge concern regarding the summer months getting too hot. Yes, you'll be hot without your AC, but you'll survive. In the winter, it gets really, really cold. And if you don't have electricity for a number of days, your house may go, down into freezing. So at that point, I really suggest to buy a rocket stove. Something else that you could do is simply build some sort of cement stove, and what I would do is put that in my garage and vent it out. So the only thing that you really need to do to prep for that would be to buy cement blocks, obviously have wood nearby, and then also put some sort of venting out the side of your garage wall or the roof. Something even easier, if you have some sort of shed, you could put the cement stove in there. And I would just Google how to make your own cement stove, and that will be at least something, right? I'm not saying this is an ideal way to heat your house all the time. It'll be something in a scenario where you are freezing and need to have some sort of heat to survive. So those are really my very, very simple get started home things. And don't neglect the home things, because if you have all the food in the world but you're freezing or you can't cook it, not going to help you. You need to be able to build some sort of fire. And in addition to that, think about learning how to build a fire before you're in a situation where you need to cook all of your rice and you can't because you don't know how to start a fire. It's actually not super easy. I'll be honest, we have a wood stove. It takes a little bit of time to get that thing started every day if I have to start it every day, which I don't. But it takes a little bit of time and it takes a little bit of knowledge. So definitely educate yourself on that beforehand. We're going to be doing some survival classes, very basic stuff, but things like how to build a fire, how to filter water, how to build a survival shelter outdoors, just super basic stuff that everybody should know in case, God forbid, you're ever in a situation where you have to use it. So I hope those things helped you. Again, don't neglect the home prep things. Those are super necessary too. Easily just start stocking some sort of food from you and then for yourselves. And then once you start getting that basic food supply down, you'll be able to research more on how these preppers do tons of crazy food prepping and use up their supply. So I hope these were helpful for you and I hope you find them usable. Thanks.